There are plenty of ways to experience Pokemon on the Nintendo Switch, from new Pokemon Snap, to Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team, to Pokemon Cafe Mix-Up, to Pokken Tournament DX, to the brand new Pokemon Legends Arceus game. You could buy literally nothing but Pokemon games for your Nintendo Switch and have enough variety to keep you occupied for a pretty long time. At the center of the Nintendo Switch Pokemon lineup are of course the Generation 8 mainline entries in the franchise, Pokemon Sword and Shield, alongside Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. With the recent announcement of Gen 9, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I thought it would be a good time to revisit the existing mainline games on the Switch to see what we liked and what we didn't. Are Diamond and Pearl better than Sword and Shield? How can they build on what these games have already accomplished in Scarlet and Violet? Are there more important things I could be worrying about? Of course not. Let's do a video on it. Ever since the Game Boy Advance days of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, it's been a tradition that with every new console generation of Pokemon comes a remake of one of the previous generations, reproduced with the same art style and engine as its respective current generation games. Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire were shortly followed by Fire Red and Leaf Green, which were of course remakes of the original games. The original Diamond and Pearl on Nintendo DS introduced the engine we would later play Heart Gold and Soul Silver on. Pokemon X and Y paved the way for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire on the 3DS, and the Nintendo Switch gave us Pokemon Sword and Shield, closely followed by, of course, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Most of the time, the art style and flow of the remakes match up pretty closely to the current generation game it's based around, but things are just a little bit different on the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo is starting to branch out and try to pave a new path for mainline Pokemon entries, and Pokemon Sword and Shield are in many ways the start of that trend. There are so many new features and stylistic changes to the formula in Sword and Shield that they couldn't really remake Diamond and Pearl to fit perfectly into their new engine without dramatically redoing the game, so they just sort of didn't. You can tell right off the bat when you look at these games side by side that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl aren't trying to copy Sword and Shield. The comparison we're making between Sword and Shield and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is almost like a direct comparison between the traditional top-down Pokemon style from the late 90s and early 2000s and the modern era of Pokemon. The way that each of these worlds are structured is a good way to start this comparison. Pokemon Sword and Shield ushered in a brand new way to explore and catch Pokemon with the Wild Area, which is a vast field that connects the different areas of the Galar region and is home to all kinds of wild Pokemon roaming about. We've never had anything like the Wild Area in a mainline Pokemon game before, prior to Sword and Shield, and regardless of some of the common types of criticism that this area gets for being a little too bland or small, I honestly really enjoyed spending time there between gyms, catching new Pokemon, or grinding to level up my team by fighting some of the bigger wild Pokemon that were just a little too overleveled for my team to deal with at the time. There are plenty of different sections within the wild area that feel unique and that have different types of Pokemon wandering around, so the first playthrough really had a feeling of wonder and adventure to it. One neat thing about the wild area is the Gigantamax raid battles. The whole map is scattered with these red raid caverns where you can fight against Dynamax versions of Pokemon in the hopes of catching them for your team. These raid battles are entertaining and are especially appreciated by competitive players because they offer a unique opportunity to catch Pokemon with perfect IV stats. For those of you non-competitive players out there, IVs are basically an individual Pokemon's potential base stats after you finish the main storyline in both Sword and Shield and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. The game will tell you how good each of your Pokemon's base stats are, and a perfect IV would be one that says best. These are only really important for competitive play and battle tower battles because with all of the Pokemon being set to the same level of 50, this is the only real way to edge the others out stats-wise. It's not like the main story mode where you can roll into a gym battle with a crazy overleveled team and steamroll the gym leader. A level 50 Dragapult with all best stats will always beat out another level 50 Dragapult who doesn't have any, so hopefully that helps it make sense. The training opportunities in the wild area are probably one of its best attributes. There are some aspects of the wild area that are commonly criticized, like could the wild area have been bigger? Sure. Could there have been more variety within the wild area? Probably, but that's okay. It feels almost like a small-scale precursor to what we would eventually see in Pokemon Legends Arceus, but still blended in with the traditional Pokemon style. This is almost like a test drive of the concept, and I'm hoping to continue to see this idea fleshed out in future entries. The same positive things can't really be said about the Grand Underground, which I guess you could say is Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl's version of the Wild Area. The Grand Underground is a series of caves and caverns below the Sinnoh region where you can mine for rare items, and is also the only place in the game where you can find Pokemon roaming around like you would see in the entirety of the game in Sword and Shield. I understand people who might have thought the Wild Area was bland on their first playthrough of Sword and Shield, but now that we have the Grand Underground, the Wild Area really seems like it's bursting with life in comparison. I'll be honest, I did not spend nearly as much time in the Grand Underground during my Brilliant Diamond playthrough as I did in the Wild Area during my Sword playthrough. There are plenty of reasons for this, of course, but for me, I think it boils down to the fact that it feels entirely separate from the main story. In Sword and Shield, you were actually required to pass through the Wild Area on various occasions so you could advance to the next part of the story. There's even an event in the beginning where the main characters meet you there. In Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, you could potentially make it through the entire game without ever stepping foot in the Grand Underground, because to get there, you need to talk to a random old man NPC who's hanging out in this random house who gives you the exploration gear that you need to get underground. I found him pretty easily because I like spending the time talking to NPCs in video games, but I do know people who don't play like that. And it's definitely possible to miss the Grand Underground entirely if you don't happen to speak with the correct NPC. The story will advance either way because the Grand Underground literally has nothing to do with the overarching story. Honestly, missing out on it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because once you do get to the Grand Underground, you're greeted by long, boring hallways that lead to rooms filled with mostly common Pokemon to catch. These rooms are also kind of small and really do make you appreciate the sprawling landscape that the Wild Area offers in comparison. I appreciate that Nintendo tried to include something fresh for this experience, but they missed the mark with the Grand Underground in my opinion. Moving forward into Scarlet and Violet, I would like to see the Wild Area ideas executed on a little bit of a higher level, and from the minimal footage we've seen of the game so far, it already looks like they may be trying to address fans' concerns about how barren the Wild Area feels. Something that I didn't really love about Sword and Shield were the routes between towns and how they were pretty much disconnected from the Wild Area. I'd like to see the new iteration of the Wild Area be more or less the main connector between towns, rather than the route system that we got in Sword and Shield that ended up being completely separate from the Wild Area. At one point during the trailer, we see a very lonely Meowth walking down this path towards what seems to be a crossroads with road signs at it. I'm guessing the road sign points towards the different towns, and if all of the routes between the towns can have this kind of open world look and feel to them, sort of like the Wild Area, that would be a plus. They should just scrap the traditional route system altogether and give us a fully open world, kind of like Arceus, with all of the towns being connected by this big quote-unquote wild area landscape. We really don't have too much to go off of with the Scarlet and Violet trailer footage we have, but there's enough there that I'm kind of optimistic about it. We'll see what happens as more and more stuff gets revealed. One of the more controversial topics surrounding Pokemon Sword and Shield's release was the reduced roster of Pokemon in the game's Pokedex. Some people were upset because it would be the first game where you couldn't get every single Pokemon from the games that came before it. I can see both sides on this one. On the one hand, one of the cool things about each new Pokemon game is the fact that the amount of Pokemon you can choose from increases every single game, but on the other hand, there are almost 1,000 unique Pokemon at this point. How can we expect the developers to find a way to pack every single one of them into the new games, especially considering that they all need fully animated 3D models now as opposed to the pixelated sprites that we used to have in the old handheld titles? I will say, one thing I do think is good about reducing the amount of returning Pokemon in new titles is that it forces players to learn how to use the newer offerings in the series. People would probably just run a super team from Gens 1 through 4 in every game if they had the chance to do so, leaving out all of the newly developed creatures. I think the rookies deserve some love. I mean, just look at Obstagoon. He's literally a KISS band member, and Toxtricity is awesome too. I think giving the new Pokemon a brighter spotlight is overall a good thing for the franchise, which is why the roster reduction didn't really bother me a whole lot. The Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl Pokédex is basically the same as it was back when the games first came out on the Nintendo DS, which is a good and bad thing. This is good for all my fellow nostalgia junkies out there who just want a fresh way to experience the same old classic game from the DS, but it's not so good because it also retains some of the original problems it had back on the DS. Specifically, this Pokédex really does lack variety. As I was playing through the game, I kept asking myself, how many more times do I have to battle an Onix, a Golbat, or a Glameow? And where the heck are all the fire types? I'm glad I picked Chimchar as my starter, because if I hadn't, then Rapidash was pretty much my only other option. One of the Elite Four members is literally a fire-type trainer, but his team only has 2 fire-type Pokemon on it out of the 5. Oh, and I guess his Steelix knows Fire Fang, but that's not how this is supposed to work. There are plenty of Pokemon from the Sinnoh region that I do adore, including Garchomp, Bronzong, and of course we can't forget that Sinnoh gave us Lucario. When you look at the lack of variety on this roster, especially before you open up the post-game National Pokédex, this is another aspect of the game that just made me appreciate what we had in Sword and Shield that much more. I understand that your options do open up a bit in the post-game, and for a lot of players, that's where the training wheels come off and the real game begins. But I would argue that the main storyline matters just as much, if not more, than the post-game for most players, because many of them won't ever really touch the post-game content. There are definitely more Pokemon players out there who will just beat the Elite Four and call it a day, than people who are taking the competitive post-game stuff more seriously. These casual players don't really care about post-game content, and since these players are a huge factor into whether or not a game actually sells well and is overall given a positive rating by the court of public opinion, that makes the main story arc that much more important, and that includes the roster. We don't have anything to go off of in terms of what the Scarlet and Violet roster will look like, but we do know what the starters look like, so comment down below which starter you think you're going to be choosing. Speaking of the main storyline, comparing the main adventures in these two games is another aspect that I wanted to touch on here. Both of these games have a lot in common story-wise, as all mainline Pokemon entries do. Both games send you on a journey to complete your Pokédex, both games give you a rival whose main story trope is realizing they're not the main character of a Pokemon game, and both games have you battle through 8 gyms to earn your right to eventually battle the Pokemon League and become the new Pokemon champion. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are as traditional as it gets from a storytelling standpoint. You bulldoze through 8 gyms that are located in 8 little sleepy towns. Absolutely clap the Elite Four once you're done with it. And while you're at that, you're stopping Team Galactic from taking over the Pokemon world. Team Galactic grunts all have the same 3 weak Pokemon, so battling them actually became a bit of a chore after a while. Also, how do they all look the same? I like to think that Cyrus, the Team Galactic leader, just had 100 children and forced them all to join his crime syndicate family business. Sword and Shield are similar in structure. You have to fight through the gym challenge to challenge the champion, and you have to save the world from the bad guy who is trying to harness the power of a legendary Pokemon along the way. The bad guy actually ends up being Greasy Hair McGee, the chairman of the Pokemon League, which is a predictable but pretty unique twist for a Pokemon game. I think what really sets Sword and Shield apart from the other Pokemon games is the amount of charm and character the Galar region has. In the Galar region, the Pokemon Gym Challenge is treated as a spectator sporting event, so every time you challenge a gym leader, it feels like a grand event inside of a massive soccer stadium with the crowd chanting and singing along as they watch your battle. It really livens up the mood of the game and is a really nice departure from the bland, isolated gym battles that happen in the more traditional games like those in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. The Galar region also has the Dynamax feature available during battle at all of its major stadiums, which is another neat feature that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl really don't have. A lot of the newer generations have had this new battle gimmick, like Mega Evolutions and Dynamaxing, whereas the Diamond and Pearl remakes chose not to adapt any of them. The Gym Challenge, rather than leading to a mysterious Elite Four at the end of the game, culminates in this grand tournament between all of the previous gym leaders and the other gym challengers who have earned their 8 badges. The winner of the tournament earns the right to challenge champion Leon, who is literally the embodiment of charisma and is one of the coolest champions we've had in a Pokemon game. The final tournament literally feels like a Pokemon version of the Super Bowl, and the energy these battles bring is something that I hope to see in future Pokemon games for sure. Even beyond the look and feel of the gym battles, just take a look at the difference between the way some of these towns are designed in the 2 games. There are some extremely beautiful areas in Sword and Shield, but with Diamond and Pearl, we're stuck in that sort of top-down, old-school Pokemon view. Now, I'm not saying that I don't enjoy the art direction of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. It, of course, does a nice job of reintroducing us to the old-school Pokemon vibe that many of us grew up with, but I am saying that I also genuinely like the direction that the world design in Pokemon is heading in for the future. Comparing Sword and Shield directly to the remastered Diamond and Pearl world adds another level of appreciation to the vision the developers have for these franchises moving forward. It seems like Scarlet and Violet will be jumping further into this newer style, and I'm definitely here for it. So to wrap things up, what I'm trying to say here is that while they still definitely have flaws of their own, Pokemon Sword and Shield provide a better overall experience than Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I think this is especially true for fans who might be just getting into Pokemon for the first time. I think the variety of the Sword and Shield roster, the charm of its story and world, and the addition of the wild area make it a much more immersive and approachable game for new fans of the series. While I was able to find plenty of enjoyment in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and I'm sure plenty of other fans will too, those games are through and through just traditional Pokemon games. Considering how far video games have come since the traditional Pokemon formula was the dominating force in the gaming market, I think the bare bones remaster approach of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl does leave a tiny bit to be desired. I think it would have been better had they taken the Sinnoh region and completely remade it into something that resembles the world from Sword and Shield. But with the limited resources I'm sure they had, as the developers also worked to complete Pokemon Legends Arceus and to support their 15,000 other spin-off titles, I can totally understand why they opted to go for the more faithful remaster. If you haven't played any Pokemon on the Switch yet and are looking to get into it ahead of the Scarlet and Violet releases this fall, I think Sword and Shield are a great place to start. And yes, I do realize that Dr. Fauci is only spelled with one C.